appeared as if, at least in the early goings, Cousins earned every penny of his guaranteed $84 million, completing all 4 of his pass attempts for 42 yards and a touchdown. Now, pair this with 2 dynamic receivers and that dominant Vikings offense, and you might have a Super Bowl contender here. Chris Kenny, how much better does Kirk Cousins make the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, the Vikings front office is hoping that he makes them one game better and helps them get to the Super Bowl. That's why they're paying him $10 more million per year over what Case Keenum got with the Denver Broncos. It's because he's a better quarterback from a talent perspective than Case Keenum. And CC, you were making the point talking about how the Vikings defense was playing against Case in their preseason game this past weekend. Yeah. And you were saying how those guys were going to pack it in terms of the coverage between the numbers, force Case Keenum to throw the ball outside of the numbers. He's a limited quarterback when it comes to arm talent and making those specific type of throws. But Kirk Cousins gives you a little more variety on the offensive side of the ball because he has that arm talent to be able to stretch the field and challenge the defense on all 3 levels. So you have more variety. You should be more explosive on the offensive side of the ball. If you put it with that championship caliber defense, this should be a team that's capable of getting to the Super Bowl.
And listen, I know people will look at Case Keenum's numbers last year and say, I mean, he was an excellent quarterback. He was almost not quite the volume of yards, but quarterback rating-wise, right in line with what Kirk Cousins has done over the last 3 years. But it wasn't quite through smoke and mirrors, but it was through a lot of really good work by Pat Shurmur. It's one of the reasons why he's now a head coach somewhere, and the Vikings have a new offensive coordinator.
Had several opportunities.
Right, and because of what he did with Case Keenum, you are not going to have to do so many call it exotic things to move the football through the air with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. And I know people this morning focused on the touchdown pass, the short one to Stefon Diggs, but the play that set up that touchdown pass, it's simply, I don't think Case Keenum can make this throw. I don't think Case Keenum, I don't know where it is in the progression. See, you can see that, I really can't. But what I know is he throws it right when the corner's beat and right before the safety's going to get there. What else is happening?
They run a little play action, a little counter action. Thielen's coming across the field as his primary. He takes the harder throw and throws it up the sideline. Stefon Diggs runs a little stutter go here. He puts it in a place that he can only put him. But, Nick, you pointed out the flight of this football. Case does not have as strong as arm. All right, so watch how quick this ball gets over the DB's head, up and down, inside the red zone to be able to take advantage even of tight coverage. That's not something that they could do last year, or it's not something they could depend on doing week in and week out.
Now, there is going to be a little adjustment, and you're right, from last year to this year because Pat Shurmur is now with the Giants. They've got John DeFilippo, the quarterback's coach from the Eagles. He's going to come over and be their OC. So there's going to be some moving parts with the understanding of the offense, with the skill position guys, Thielen, Diggs, Rudolph, those guys. They're going to have to adjust to a little bit of a different system, maybe some change in verbiage, that type of thing. But Kirk Cousins, he's going to make things so much easier for those guys. They're not going to have to do as much of the heavy lifting. With Case Keenum, because he was limited talent-wise, there was a lot that was put on those skill position players. Case Keenum Kirk Cousins should take a little bit of the pressure off of those guys. They don't have to do as much when Case Keenum was their quarterback. They won't have to do as much this season.
Are they better this year? How much?
Well, they have to be better. I mean, there's only one way that you could say that it was the right decision for the Minnesota Vikings, which is that group gets past the NFC Championship game. A lot of things fell their way last year, including Aaron Rodgers getting hurt. Anthony Barr sacked him, broke his clavicle. We all know the story. So this is going to be a tougher conference than they faced last year, a lot more competition. So it's not going to be an easy road for the Minnesota Vikings, but I do think they're a significantly better team just because they upgraded at the quarterback position.
The Vikings, I believe, they can benefit the same way Philadelphia did. I don't believe Philadelphia makes it to the Super Bowl and Super Bowl champs. They don't have home field advantage. So it's not as if we need Kirk Cousins to be one game better. We need Kirk Cousins over 16 games that they could have the best record. If they had the best record in the NFC, they could play in Minneapolis, which would be a huge advantage in trying to get to the Super Bowl in Atlanta. So as we watch this NFC that is very, very deep, the Rams, the Eagles, the Vikings, Green Bay, Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, all these teams that are stockpiled, like, we need to start thinking about home field advantage because the Vikings with that bad offensive line, if you got a bad offensive line, you do not want to be on the road. And we saw in Philadelphia, man, they manhandled that offense. offensive line, and that's what led to the Philadelphia Eagles getting to Super Bowl 52.
Well, and so that's the key. If we're going to do like a tale of the tape between the Eagles, which right now are the gold standard in the NFC and maybe in football, and the Vikings, if I just kind of go unit for unit, I like the Vikings secondary more. I like the Vikings linebackers more. I like the Eagles defensive line more. I like the Vikings wide receivers more. I like the Eagles running backs more. I like the Eagles quarterback more. I like the Vikings coach more. But they're all pretty close. And then the one spot...
Vikings wide receivers over the Eagles wide receivers.
Oh, yeah, I thought I mentioned that. I apologize if I didn't. The one spot, though, where it is not close is offensive line. It wasn't close a month ago, by the way. And since then, their best offensive lineman, arguably Nick Easton. What was the stat on Easton last year, C?
Over 400 snaps. Only 5 guards played 400 snaps.